The universe is an insane and unimaginably large realm, shrouded in a lot of mysteries. From distant exoplanets to untouched galaxies bearing signs of life, to super puffy planets and the infamous black hole, the list runs endlessly. Of course, there are several travel plans to other planets, but one problem makes the exploration of the universe more of a Herculean task, and that is distance. Besides, the closest star to us is about 4.5 light years away, making it almost impossible to visit with the current space technologies. If only there was a faster way to travel through space. Maybe that could change. Recently, science has stumbled across the discovery of the warp bubble that allows for faster than the speed of light travel. What is this discovery, and how has it changed space exploration? Join us as we take a look at the first warp bubble and how it changes the future of space exploration. This is Posh Future, where we discuss the latest and most interesting updates from the world of science and technology. Do well to subscribe and hit the notification bell to the channel so as to stay notified when a new video is uploaded. Alright, let's dive in. The idea of a warp bubble should come as no surprise for fans of the blockbuster movie Star Trek. In the movie, characters could be seen traveling through the universe with an insanely fast spacecraft. Does that ring a bell? Of course it should. Famous German physicist Albert Einstein predicts in his theory of general relativity that no object with mass can move into space on quantum faster than the speed of light. In fact, the nearest star to us, Proxima Centauri, takes about 4.5 light years to reach. That is, if you manage to go by the speed of light, you might reach the star in 4.5 years. However, light flies at a full cosmic speed of 300,000 kilometers per second, so you can imagine how impossible this would turn out to be. Here is the crazy part. Even if you decide to use the fastest spaceship ever built by NASA, the Parker Solar Probe, the long and tiring interstellar journey might just take you 8,000 years to complete. Who lives that long, by the way? But that's all about to change. By accident, scientists created an unimaginable and almost impossible artificial warp bubble. How they came about this trailblazing idea is such a wonder, but it all boils down to one scientist, physicist Miguel Alcubierre. The eureka moment came to him in 1994 while conducting his PhD research on the theory of general relativity. He watched an episode of the Next Generation movie. Then and there, the redefining moment in his study came to him in a flash. Here is a quick one. Remember we told you this theory holds that no object with mass can move into space on quantum faster than the speed of light? Voila! That was all that was needed. So Alcubierre tore out a sheet of paper, scribbled some calculations, and arrived at the foundations for publication that later appeared in a scientific magazine some months later. In his publication, Miguel Alcubierre narrated how scientists can reduce space and time in the front of a spaceship while stretching it behind the ship to create a shorter distance traveling to wherever you want to in the universe. In other words, he describes it as a Tertian bubble. And to put it more visually, imagine it like you're surfing on a wave. Despite the promising prospects the Alcubierre warp bubble seems to be offering, it had a little problem. The engine was almost impossible to build in reality. I mean, you can't just wake one day and decide to curve space with normal mathematics. There's got to be more, right? You see, to achieve this, you need an exotic matter that defies the laws of gravity. And this soon sparked an interesting debate in the scientific community, with dozens of publications about the warp engine emerging through the following decades. Sadly, there were mainly theoretical applications that exploited the theory of relativity instead of revealing newer breakthroughs. This must have cast a dark cloud over the scientific community. But that was short-lived, as Erik Lentz, a physicist from the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, stepped right in to save the day. For Lentz, his fantasy started with Star Trek, and Lentz, while in elementary school, wondered whether warp drive might also be brought to real life. As a young child, this seemed like an almost impossible dream. Like it is common with every child, he grew up and found himself studying physics at the University of Washington, where he wrote his PhD dissertation on the topic of dark matter. Life got so busy that he had to desert his love for science fiction. As fate would have it, events in Lentz's life took a different direction at the start of the coronavirus pandemic, and he found himself alone in Göttingen, Germany, where he was conducting his postdoctoral work. He suddenly had plenty of free time on his hands, so what better way was there to spend it than to return to the childhood fantasies in his head? He began to read all he could find on warp drives in the scientific publications, which to his dismay was not very much. Then he began to wonder about it himself, and after a few weeks, the idea snuck up on him. Could there be something everyone seems to be overlooking? Starting from this point, Lentz put his idea on paper and discussed it with more experienced colleagues. A year later, it was published in a physics journal. In his journal, Lentz took a step further and tried out some unusual mathematical equations and realized he could also solve formulas with them. In the Taussian bubble recovered by him, the mass was in the places where the curvature was most significant. However, the icing on the cake would be the creation of the bubble from easily gotten materials like plastics, ceramics, rubbers, you name it. Even though the Lentz engine was more achievable than Alcubierre's, it still had a particular shortcoming. You still needed a lot of mass for it, almost 1,000 times smaller than the sun. With this, the warp bubble was never fated to see the light of the day. And that was what everyone thought until Dr. Harold G. White and his team set up a new standard for the way things were done. In a study funded by the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency (DARPA) and National Aeronautics Space Agency (NASA), Harold White and his team of researchers published an article about a possible energy structure existing in the Casimir cavity. By accident, the team came across a micro-nanoscale system that could see negative energy density distribution that seems perfect for the Alcubierre engine first proposed. The scientist Harold White also confirmed that they were able to find a real warp bubble. Moreover, in an interview, White detailed the numerical methods of the team's custom Casimir cavity that helped in uncovering the original warp bubble. Even more interesting, the idea of a warp bubble existing under these conditions is something you don't get to see every day. To put it in another way, White and his team accidentally developed a microscopic experiment on how energy distributes around wavelength. This groundbreaking event was achieved by applying a theory propagated by Dutch physicist Hendrik Casimir, and the research resulted in enough theoretical energy that resulted in warp speed, a concept first postulated by Alcubierre. White, who was then a NASA employee and founder of the Eagle Work Laboratories, modified Alcubierre's original metric and placed it in an inexpensive form. These changes in the structure and design drastically reduced the initial concept of extravagant materials and high energy density. This improved method provided scientists and sci-fi devotees with high hopes that the warp bubble might eventually shift from the imaginary realm into something more practical. In addition, this also led to the unofficial renaming of the initial theoretical design, a concept now propounded as the Alcubierre-White warp drive. Rewind to when White first started his latest double-funded study into custom Casimir cavities, a peculiar small-scale structure with all types of promising applications. He never expected it to turn out so big. The advantages of the Casimir cavity and the mouth-watering quantum scale forces were in no way associated with warp drive assumptions or even its mechanisms. However, White and his team believes they could break through this restraint and come up with an amazing concept that leaves the scientific community floored. Little wonder when White and his team issued their findings, it became the first article to generate such a reaction from members of the scientific community. The paper proposes an achievable nanostructure that is envisioned to manifest a real warp bubble. Besides, These findings not only confirmed the prediction of negative energy aspects of the warp bubble, but also resulted in possible pathways White and other scientists could follow when trying to design a real-world spacecraft. In the words of White, he says, "This is a potential structure we can propose to the community that one could build that would generate a negative vacuum energy distribution that is very similar to what is required for an Alcubierre space warp." In furtherance, White and his group of researchers, in a bid to move the study forward, came up with a proposed design test table for a nanoscale warp drive craft. In fact, the initial experiment that White was working on involved a toy imitation consisting of a 1-micron diameter sphere situated at the center of a 4-micron cylinder. This was investigated to depict a 3-dimensional Casimir energy density that matches the demands of the Alcubierre warp metric. As a result, White believes a low-budget trial testing might be the right answer in illustrating the warp drive in Star Trek. In addition, White suggests the community makes use of potential structure to create a negative vacuum energy density diffusion akin to what is required for the Alcubierre warp bubble. Mind you, prior to these groundbreaking findings, White and his group never built nor tested the proposed nanoscale warp craft blueprints. In spite of this, White suggests if the RSI team wants to take that at some point, they will most likely use a nanoscribe GT 3D printer that prints at a nanometer scale. In other words, they have the means to bring this concept to life. They just need the opportunity. However, here comes the discouraging news. White recently reveals there are currently no plans to bring the warp structure to life just yet. According to him, this is largely due to their current laser focus on the custom Casimir cavities. Owing to this, White and his team are indispensable in building the proposed nanoscale warp craft. This conveniently brings them to the second testing trial that involves stringing a number of Casimir, which created warp bubbles in a chain-like configuration. What more, this design would enable scientists to better comprehend the physics behind the warp bubble structure already created and how the spacecraft might one day traverse actual space. You see, the whole truth about White's reluctance to branch into developing the nanoscale warp drive model isn't so far-fetched. It's all summarized in the fact that DARPA is funding the LSI Eagle Work project to explore the Casimir cavities and not the accidental discovery of a warp bubble. All the same, White believes it's only a matter of time before his mini warp craft is designed and tested, whether by him or another scientist. However, White warned, this doesn't mean we're close to building a fully functioning warp drive. Nonetheless, there's a silver lining that humanity may one day be shuffling around the cosmos, just like it was done with the Star Trek warp bubble. We're truly excited about the new warp bubble and can't wait till it hits reality. What about you? Let's hear your opinion in the comment section below.